Georgia 2008. Forgotten War. Putin's Ukraine rehearsal. This is what we're gonna talk about today. This video, in some ways, is my apology to the people of Georgia, because I couldn't and I didn't support them enough back then. I tried, but it wasn't enough. The war in Georgia, which was last several days, and get successfully forgotten by many of us, unfortunately, it was full rehearsal of Putin's attack on Ukraine. It emboldened Putin. It gave him a taste of victory of little successful war, little successful invasion of neighboring country. It was the first war in Europe Putin started, and he liked the results. Hello there, I'm Elena. Welcome to my political channel, Enough of Propaganda. And you're welcome to explore my channel, and thank you for coming. Revolution of Roses in Georgia brought in power young politicians who wanted to be democratic country, and the president of Georgia became Mikhail Saakashvili. And Putin didn't like it. Putin didn't want Georgia to be independent from Russia, and actually created a decent democratic country. This is one of the videos of TV Rain. The journalist Ekaterina Kotrikadze, who is from Georgia, and she was there at the time, talking about this war. But there is another video which TV Rain made, and it's the kind of investigation of this war and stuff like that. But the amount of job they did is exceptional. This is what she has to say. She's talking about that the war in Georgia in 2008 was Russian practice of full-scale invasion. There was all of it. Invasion and taking parts of independent country of Georgia, which declared independence after the break of Soviet Union, kind of like Ukraine. The times were 1991 and so on, and it became independent country. Yet Russia invaded it, and actually before even the open phase of basically the war, Russia was already giving passports, and this is what I'm saying. I watched it at the time as well, and this is known fact that Russia was started to give people of two regions of Georgia, South Ossetia and Abkhazia, Russian passports. And later on, Russia put military bases there and did a lot of things. Like there was genocide done by Ossetian separatists to Georgian people, and you will see some proofs of that by statesmen and foreign journalists who were there at the time. And a lot of things which happened in Ukraine happened in Georgia only earlier. Putin already tried full-scale invasion. He destroyed Georgian villages, opened second front in Abkhazia, then there was occupation and declaring independence of the regions which does not belong to Russia, and Russia put military bases in there.
15 лет назад Грузию накрыла настоящая трагедия. Я была там, я знаю, каково это ждать появления солдат страны-агрессора в твоей квартире и испытывать нечеловеческий, всепоглощающий ужас.
She also remembers death of her fellow comrade journalist. This is Gigi Chekladze, her friend journalist, who was one of the two journalists killed in Tskhinvali, the capital of Ossetia region. These are the regions we're talking about. This is South Ossetia, this is Abkhazia. There is a very decent article in Wikipedia about Russo-Georgian War, talking about that those regions, Abkhazia and South Ossetia, was part of Georgia, and first European war of 21st century, Russia started in Georgia. The Republic of Georgia declared independence in early 1991, when Soviet Union collapsed and so on. The difference between Ukraine and Georgia is that those regions, Abkhazia and South Ossetia, had a bit of a history, and there was some sort of unrests there before, and sometimes they had issues with Georgia even during USSR time and before and so on. But nevertheless, Despite Putin saying that NATO promised to consider Georgia for membership, the result of the discussion was basically toothless statement that maybe someday Georgia and Ukraine might join NATO. It was just a pretext and nothing more for Putin. There is a quote of Putin about NATO, and so was Medvedev was saying that basically they trying to demonize Russia and so on, and see that Russia has imperial ambitions. Yes, Russia does have imperial ambitions, but NATO has nothing to do neither with the war in Georgia nor with the war in Ukraine. It was Russian fault and Russian aggression back then and in Ukraine in 2014 and in 2022 as well. Just because Putin got away with it. And about NATO, I already have one video, but I'll make another one with footage of Putin. And what I dislike is that even media nowadays, when they're trying to say that at the time Georgia and Ukraine was talking about joining NATO and it might have upset Russia, and even there is a video on English version of TV Rain newsroom, when the same woman, Ekaterina Kotrikadze, the same journalist, was talking to Mr. Chomsky, and he trying to tell her who was there at the time and who knows more than he does about the war in Georgia, something which never happened. Please keep in mind that we cannot justify Russian aggression in Ukraine. This is not what happened. And everybody conveniently forget that at the same time, Putin and Russia wanted to join NATO. Putin was talking about that NATO is a friend and ally. And he talked to, even in 2000s, he was talking to American President Bill Clinton about Russia joining NATO. So it was only logical that former republics of the USSR, like Georgia or Ukraine, wanted to join NATO, because Russia wanted to join NATO. And I'll talk about it more in a different video. Putin was so cocky that even when Condoleezza Rice visited Georgia and they had a meeting with Georgian President Saakashvili, Russian military planes were flying right above where the meeting was taking place. Many leaders of NATO at the time, like Jaap de Hoop Scheffer, former General Secretary of NATO, they all regret their decision not to help Georgia or Ukraine back then to become NATO members. But it's too late. The war already begun, and now Georgia lost, for now, 2 territories. People get killed. This is Matthew Bryza. He is saying that, yes, that was a big mistake. Putin get warned that Georgia and Ukraine eventually someday maybe will join NATO. But now he has time to act. And Putin acted. He invaded Georgia and then he invaded Ukraine. On August 1st, 2008, Russian-backed South Ossetian forces start shelling Georgian villages. So everything started in Ossetia, South Ossetia. But before that, many people of there received Russian passports, as I say. And Georgian army was sent to the South Ossetian conflict zone on 7th of August and took control of most of Tskhinvali. Eventually, they would have won, but Russia interfered. Russian troops crossed the Georgia-Russian border through the Rocky Tunnel and advanced into Southern Ossetian conflict zone by 7th of August before the Georgian military response. Even Russia falsely accused Georgia of committing genocide and aggression against South Ossetia. And it launched a full-scale land, air, and sea invasion of Georgia. You could see that on this map, how it was done, and so on. I recommend you to look at that. So this is in general about this war. Eventually, Russia called it the operation to peace enforcement, to force Georgia to have peace. This was just outrageous lie again. And even at the time, I gave Russian benefit of the doubt. I was wrong. And the war in Ukraine proved it time and time again that it was a wrong idea. it was Russian fault and Russian invasion. Yet the world let it slide. This is make Putin bolder, and he decided to open second front in Abkhazia. And at the same time, this was the first war in history which cyber warfare coincided with military action. An information war was also waged during and after the conflict. Nicolas Sarkozy, President of France, personally negotiated ceasefire agreement on 12th of August. So the war was very short. Sarkozy, known for not having clean hands as a politician and supporting Russia in some ways. For example, in this article, you can read Sarkozy's Russian fling. When he was saying in 2015, he was also defended Russian annexation of Crimea, saying that France didn't want a resurgence of the Cold War. And he was even compared to French politician Marine Le Pen, who was basically on the side of Putin. And this is a Russian TASS. Sarkozy is thinking that Putin is a person who always keeps his word. Good one. How about Budapest Memorandum, which Russia signed, and yet it attacked Ukraine? And this is 2020. It's already war in Ukraine was going on at the time. And yet, Russian propaganda used him very well. And Sarkozy wrote a book, a memoirs about when he talking about Putin very favorably, and even helped Russia to build a Russian Orthodox church in Paris. I actually seen that church, and so on. And Sarkozy was one of who was behind it. So it's Putin's supporter negotiated the ceasefire. While I was making this video, the Putin's buddy Nicolas Sarkozy opened his mouth again. He gave an interview to Le Figaro and said something about Ukraine, that several wrong things about that. He said he doesn't believe that Ukraine gonna win and need to discuss some sort of a Ukraine giving some sort of a territories. He's talking about Crimea, and basically lied about, or he just that ignorant, which I highly doubt. He's thinking that majority of the people in Crimea always considered themselves as Russians, which, as I proved to you in a poll done in 2011 and in 2013 by international organizations, only 40% of Crimeans considered themselves Russians, and so on. So he was acting again like pro-Putin buddy. On the bright side, Sarkozy said that the annexation of Crimea in 2014 was obvious breaking of international law, I mean by Russia. And no doubt, meanwhile, he completely forgot that Russia did not fulfill the agreements about Georgia in 2008. And they keep pushing, even now, they keep pushing the border between South Ossetia, for example, and Georgia. So what was happening?
15 лет назад российские ракеты уже попадали в жилые дома здесь, в Грузии. Военные стояли на подступах к Тбилиси, а Владимир Путин, тогда премьер, прервал поездку на Олимпиаду в Пекин.
He came to the border, basically, to Georgia. In 2008, Russia used in mass missiles in Georgia from .U missiles up to Hurricane and Iskander. The first Iskander missile Putin shot was towards Georgia, towards Gori. This is map of Georgia. Tbilisi is the capital. This is Gori, that is where it is. And this is South Ossetia, and Tskhinvali was the capital. This is the footage of strike on city Gori, which actually birthplace of Stalin. This happened in August 2008. Besides, this city is not part of Ossetia or Abkhazia. This is Georgia. Russia made a strike on that city, and this footage was all over the world. It was very little and very successful war for Putin, and the world just turned a blind eye. According to Mamuka Kurashvili, who was in 2008 the commander of peacekeepers of the General Staff of Georgian Army, only high commanders like Dmitry Medvedev, the president of Russia, could give the order to shoot those missiles. Russians was aiming at the tank brigade headquarters, but they hit the civilian apartment building. 13 people died. Among those dead people was a journalist from Holland, Stan Storemans. The Stalin monument in the middle of the square survived. Later on, Georgia brought the pieces of the missile into the international court. And yet, Russia was denying it like always. We saw it many times in Ukraine, saying that its CIA agents take apart Russian missile and throw around pieces in Georgia, or pieces of that missile. So Putin lied then, lying now, and continue lying. And not just Putin, Russia as well. At the time, Dmitry Medvedev was the president, and he responsible for that. Russian forces was ready to capture Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia, but they stopped, and they didn't go to take it.
Ракету запустили 12 августа, за полчаса до подписания соглашения о прекращении огня. До этого момента в Грузии готовились оборонять столицу.
I watched a statement of on TV Rain, in another video of TV Rain, of legendary journalist of Guardian, Luke Harding, who was there at the time. He was talking about the genocide against Georgian people in Ossetia, for example, when the whole families, just because being Georgian, were killed. And Russia knew about that. He doesn't blame it on Russia as a country, but Russia knew about that. They were separatists supported by Russia who did that. And many other things. His witness statement is basically very interesting to watch. I hope they will publish it in English. Luke Harding is telling the story how he went right to Gori, to that place which was shelled, and he said it was full-scale war going on. And people might say, some people blamed, and the president of Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili, said Russia was there already. And Russia was attacking Georgia, Russia was attacking Abkhazia as well, and so on. So my point is, it is not Georgia attacked Russia. Russia attacked Georgia. He wrote a book, and he was saying also that before all that war and full-scale invasion, Russia already was in Abkhazia and in Ossetia. And he's saying that they were building railroads and roads there. They was made the practices like military exercises and so on. It was obvious that the war is unavoidable, and Russia was already there. There is nothing Georgia could have done to stop it. Basically, I am saying, because Russia was already there. Everybody knew that wars cannot be avoided. Another thing is about looting. That was happening in Georgia as much as it's happening in Ukraine. This guy stole the golden fork, cutlery made out of gold. While confronted, the guy saying, "Oh, it's none of your business." And this guy took away somebody's car and pretending he didn't steal it. The agreement was signed, and Russia was supposed to move back to the positions before the war.
Российская позиция, она проста. План Медведева-Саркози удался, выполнен на 100%. Все другие интерпретации я не слышу. Что касается отвода войск, то он произошел. Он произошел. Позиции. Да, и вот в этом смысле надвоенные позиции в понимании российской стороны.
But in Abkhazia and South Ossetia, Russia started to build new military bases and so on, and basically controlling all these territories. It's not formally part of Russia, but it's controlled by Russia nevertheless. This is a budget of South Ossetia, 8.78 billion rubles. Russian help, 7.8 billion rubles. So 80% of the budget of South Ossetia is coming from Russia. Russian losses in the Georgian war still unknown. They changed in their numbers several times. As to Georgia, they lost 179 military personnel and 2,000 wounded. Hundreds of civilians were wounded and several people were killed.
Я подписал указы о признании Российской Федерации независимости Южной Осетии и независимости Абхазии.
Let's talk about responsibility for the Russia-Georgian War. Both sides in 2008 blamed each other. And there is no question that Russia was responsible. And the same thing said Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili. It was even before anything happened. Russia was already interfered with Georgian independence and trying to steer unrest in those regions. Georgia first said that military offensive responded to Ossetian shelling of Georgian villages, and it intended to restore constitutional order in South Ossetia. Please remember that. Georgian president at the time, Mikhail Saakashvili, was saying that only idiots and morons could believe that Georgia is at fault. Period. Georgia was defending their territorial integrity and constitutional order. And he said there are lots of proofs and facts about that. And it is true. But still, all that peaceful Westerners who didn't know a lot about it, trying to blame Georgia for what they do. And if we wouldn't know what happened in Ukraine in 2014, I want to put attention to this, that that is why Alexander Turchinov, who wasn't even a president, who was temporary figure in Ukraine, which actually was the leader of the parliament, legally elected by Ukrainian people, that's why they couldn't do anything, because they was also grabbed by the hands by the foreigners, several politicians like Angela Merkel and Barack Obama and so on, representatives of Barack Obama. And they were saying, oh, don't provoke Russia, don't do this, don't do that. Russia attacked Ukraine and grabbed Crimea, and Russia attacked Georgia. Georgia acted. And now they trying to blame Georgia for trying to defend itself. This is what happened. Georgia lost 2 territories. This is what happened in Ukraine. Ukraine lost Crimea because Ukraine chose not to use the armed forces. And probably that's why Ukrainian President Zelensky now in 2022 didn't do much in the beginning, because Mikhail Saakashvili from Georgia did. And he got blamed for it. According to Daniel Fried, senior expert, if I translate correctly, of Atlantic Council, he was also present in a time when State Secretary Condoleezza Rice visited Georgia, and they were told to President Saakashvili of Georgia that the Putin tried to provoke him and he shouldn't respond. Not shouldn't, but it's not wise to respond to Putin provocations. But according to Mr. Fried, there is nothing Georgia could have done. There is nothing Georgia did to deserve that aggression from Russia. Putin wanted this war and he started it. And no matter what, Putin will be poking the Saakashvili with a stick until he responds. That is why the Ossetian separatists started to shell Georgian villages and provoked President of Georgia to respond and defend his country. Putin would have been doing it until he will get the response and pretext to attack Georgia. There is no guilt of Georgia on that. It was Russian aggression. After United States promised some help and humanitarian help to Georgia, so America revoked a brigade from Iraq and let Russia know that the United States is intent to support Georgia and so on. And probably that is why Russia did not take the capital and didn't take the whole Georgia.
Ну, скажем, была Тифлисская губерния, не было Грузии никакой.
And this is Russian opinion on Georgia. This is a Russian politician, Zhirinovsky, who passed away, actually, not too long ago. This is what he has to say.
Здесь нужно было оккупировать всю Грузию, всю армию расформировать, всех офицеров грузинских арестовать, вывести в Россию и арестовать Саакашвили, судить его, выпустить всю оппозицию, то есть навести порядок. И не уходить оттуда больше никогда. Идеальный вариант вообще ликвидация Грузии как государства.
He's thinking that Medvedev was too mild. They should arrest the whole, Georgian president, take the whole Georgia, and basically establish Russian order in there. Dmitry Medvedev get away with it, and 2 years later, everybody forgot about the war in Georgia, and he was eating burgers with American President Barack Obama, and appeared as such a democratic person. And now, over 57 times, this lunatic threatening the world with nukes. What a transformation. In January 2021, the court in Hague made a verdict and said that Russia is guilty in the aggression in Georgia and war crimes, torture, and murder of people. And these war crimes were committed after the ceasefire was signed. Even now, to this day, Russian army and South Ossetian, for example, illegal organizations pretend to be law enforcement of the country which doesn't exist. At night, basically moving border between South Ossetia and Georgia. And this man is Gogi from Kirbali village. He said he got arrested by Russians several times and a couple times and was taken to Tskhinvali, the capital of South Ossetia region. This is well-known fact, and this is even an article, Vladimir Putin's mysterious moving border, which is talking about that, and I've seen it in so many different sources, saying that sometimes Georgian people who have in a house and a garden and a property, like vegetable garden or a fruit garden, basically go to bed at night in Georgia and next day wake up in South Ossetia. Because Russians at night moved the border. This is the village Tamarasheni, which is all this was happening. And so it's well-known fact. This is the video about it as well, and even United Nations observers saw it, stuff like that happening. And so it's not something new. So Medvedev lied, and that's what they're doing with the border. Yet somehow this fact doesn't bother Nicolas Sarkozy, who made that agreement with Dmitry Medvedev of Russia. I wonder why is that. The mysteriously moving borders between South Ossetia and Georgia, that's probably what Mr. Medvedev meant by saying they fulfilled the agreement in the way Russia understands it. And in this point in time, Georgian people believe that the war isn't finished yet. This is Irakli Garibashvili, the Prime Minister of Georgia since 2021. Georgia's ruling party, Georgian Dream, and their Prime Minister, Irakli Garibashvili, have been accused of having pro-Russian leanings. And there is truth to that. However, they appear to be walking a fine line between meeting European Union requirements, avoiding upsetting Putin, and indulging their authoritarian tendencies. And that is why Georgian people are not happy with it and protesting. And that is why when the Russian tourist ships appear in the ports of Batumi or some Georgian cities, Georgian people trying to make it clear they don't want to be with Russia, they want to be closer to Europe and NATO, because they don't want Russia invade Georgia again. According to several people in this video talking, they know Russia gonna attack again, and they don't want that to happen. Comparing Russian aggression in Ukraine and in Georgia. 10 shared features we're gonna talk about. Number 1, psychological manipulation through pre-invasion propaganda targeting population of Ukraine and Georgia. Number 2, creation of attack pretexts via distribution Russian passports, citizenships, among residents of Georgia and Ukraine. Third, military invasion of sovereign nations, Georgia in 2008, Ukraine in 2014 and 2022. Fourth, opening of multiple fronts, Abkhazia in Georgia and Donbass in eastern Ukraine. Number 5, genocide and population displacement in occupied territories. Number 6, destruction of settlements and use of cluster munitions. 7, looting by Russian forces and controlled separatists. 8, challenge to sovereignty through occupation. 9, recognition of foreign regions' independence. So they recognize independence of some foreign countries, not even has anything to do with Russian territory. Number 10, establishment of military bases in controlled or occupied areas. All of that Russia has done in Ukraine and in Georgia. And distinct difference is annexation of territories into Russian Federation in Ukraine, like Crimea and several other territories now, unlike Georgia. So Abkhazia or South Ossetia, Russia hasn't taken into Russian Federation yet. Putin's success in the 2008 Georgia invasion paved the way for the subsequent war in Ukraine in 2014 and in 2022. Abkhazia and South Ossetia are parts of Georgia illegally occupied by Russia. I advocate for the restoration of Georgian sovereignty. But before that happens, I insist that Russia fulfill the 2008 agreements with Georgia. Well, I wish Georgia to be free. Thank you for Georgian people to stand up against Putin and his aggression. I'm really sorry that I couldn't help you more. This is my apology to you. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for stand up for your freedom. And thank you for watching my video. And please subscribe and like and help to spread the truth. And see you later.